I've been thinking a lot about stories, and I've been thinking a lot about the importance of telling stories, whether it's something that you feel really connected to or that you want other people to feel connected to. And after being here on this planet for about 42 years, I realize I have so many things that I could say or wisdom to impart onto people before I leave this planet. And yet I still find it difficult to find which piece would be the most prolific or helpful in any way. And I think about this a lot because I have stage 4 cancer, and I think about what my daughter will remember when I'm gone and what I want to tell her about the world. And I don't know what to tell her. The world is scary. The world is amazing. People are jerks. People are angels. Do I, tell her about, the small things, like walking across the street without your headphones on so that you don't get hit by a car? These are just things you pick up as you age. How to find a partner, how to change your tire on a car. I'm not really sure how long I'm going to have. Hopefully I'll live to be 80. But I want to leave something for her. I want to leave something for the people who I love behind. But even then, when they go, so too will I, as my memory will just sort of fade into the distance. And that's sad and beautiful all at the same time at this point in my life, I've noticed. But there are so many stories. The story of where I came from. I'm an adopted person. I was relinquished at birth. And an interesting part about that not many people would understand is that you don't get access to your information of where you came from. At my age, people my age don't usually have a lot of that information. Some younger people do. And during the pandemic, I sent in a letter because I wanted my daughter to have a piece of paper that she could look at and say, this is where my biological ancestry comes from, in addition to the adopted ancestry. My mom and dad who raised me, that's her family. But if she wants to know more, I had to find out more. And I petitioned for my information with the state of Illinois to get my original birth certificate. And it's not as easy as anyone would think. I have to apply and give a good reason as to why I wanted my own birth certificate and access to it. And I wrote the letter, I sent everything in, and I got a call from the woman who works in the records department. And she was very concerned because I didn't exist, technically. I had a birth certificate that the lawyers managed to create and have made that looked like I was born to the people who adopted me. But there was an original birth certificate, and I had a different name and a different everything on it. And if I didn't already know those names, if I hadn't already sort of researched into any of it, I wouldn't have been able to verify that I had claim to that birth certificate, which I thought was pretty wild. And interestingly enough, after I was capable of naming the names of everyone on the birth certificate listed, the lady told me that had I gotten held up in a different country or lost my passport or anything like that, I would have tried to contact the embassy, and then they would have had to have called a records department in Illinois to see if I was a citizen of the United States, and I would not have existed in the system. They did not transfer my information over the way they were supposed to on paper. And so then when they went digital, it wasn't transferred either. And so thankfully, I was able to get that information and everything was resolved. But for a while, it was quite scary because how do you deal with knowing that you didn't legally exist this whole time on a technicality, and yet you still technically exist? But also during that time, I managed to, sort of wrap my mind around the concept of being here and being gone. Because at that time during COVID, I also had cancer. I was diagnosed with cancer the first time in 2018, the second time in 2019. And last year, they upgraded me to stage 4. And so dealing with permanence and impermanence and mortality and getting this information and trying to figure out how to impart stories and wisdom to my child while still genuinely struggling to prove that I exist felt so strange. And I hate that that's something that people have to do who are in my situation of having been relinquished or adopted. And it's much more common than people realize. So that's hard. And when she grows up, if she wants to know where she came from, now she can. But just the thought of her not being able to access any of that information made me so sad. Because that's a part of where I came from. And then I think to myself, does it even matter, like, where we came from? Like, sure, but I never had a connection to any of that growing up. I just knew that I existed and that the people that I was around and the people that I was with were my people. And I felt connected to them sometimes, but not always. And so if I have to tell stories about my life to my child so that she understands, what happened, where'd you come from, where are we going, what's going on, there's so many nuances and little pieces to tell. It's 42 years worth of a life. It's hard to push that into a small amount of time or putting it on paper in a way that really portrays the living part of having been alive. And I want my daughter to know that I did everything I possibly could to be there for her. And I love her forever, and that even if I'm gone one day, I'll still be there with her because she's a part of me. And I think stories about the past help us to remember what not to do, maybe. But they sometimes can keep us trapped in a narrative that we weren't even involved with in the first place. And when I was getting this information about my heritage and where I came from, I realized that piece of paper that said that I belonged to or was the child of, the woman who birthed me, she was never my mother. And the man listed was never my father. That's where I'm from. And that is true. But strangely, that doesn't really create who I became. The people who raised me created who I became. The love that I received from my family was the most important thing that I could have received. And while not knowing where I came from was a huge deal to me growing up. I mean, it was something that my mind just churned and churned and churned, and I couldn't stop thinking about it for a long time. And then I had my own child, and I realized how important it is to understand where you're from. But at the same time, I was able to eventually let go of that pain of being separated from my family of origin in the first place. I mean, I should be speaking a completely different language and practicing a slightly different religion had I been kept by my biological ancestors. And I don't regret any of the choices that anyone made for me. I'm not mad about them anymore. And I want my daughter to know that she's a part of something so huge and so prolific and so profound that she gets not just the people who raised me, but she also gets to claim the heritage of the people that her genetics come from, which is meaningful on multiple different levels in different ways. It's kind of a little bit of a mind bender, I suppose. Everything that we do every day becomes its own legend in a way, and some of them are big and some of them are silly. And I only ever really want to make memories with my daughter so that she has things to look back on. And I want her to remember things that are fun and happy. But there are hard things that she's going to remember. And that really hurts, I think, to think about, knowing that there are situations that happened in my life with her dad that were very tumultuous and horrible that she's going to know about. And those stories are huge, and it's going to impact her future. And I want that to not happen. I want her to be safe from all different kinds of pain and hurt and truth. But the more I think about it, the more gorgeous all of those things are. Even the most heinous of things that have happened in my life, I find now to be not a gift, but a reflection of the world and pieces of information that I can put together in order to create new choices for myself. So while it might not be a happy gift or even a gift at all, I think it's a very large piece of wisdom that should never go uncounted for. I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. I'm sorry. I'm going off on tangents. There's just so many things. So many things. My mom was a clown. My dad's a roofer. I was a clown. I was a massage therapist. I became an acupuncturist. My sister's also adopted. There's so many stories. My husband was a Boy Scout. I've traveled all over the world. And I want to do all these things with my daughter, and I don't know how much time I have. Like, I mean, I've said that already. How do I condense everything down to something where she can just sort of keep it and hold it and remember me for what I did and for who I was even before she knew me, because I became a completely different person when I became a mom, which was definitely not something I expected to have happen. I was a perfect mom before I had a kid. In my head, I was going to be the perfect mom. And now I feel like as long as we get through the day and she's taken care of and everything's copacetic, then I'm like, that's great. But I never expected to be a completely different person. And going through that in and of itself again. So who was I growing up? I wasn't related to the people who were raising me. I was my own person that I didn't know. I had to find out who I was. Then I started to find out who I was, and I had a baby, and I became a mom, and then I was a different person again. So life is just constant change. I feel like everybody knows that somehow. And yet, I also feel like we always forget it when we're around other people that we don't know. Giving people the gift of grace, or knowing that someone's going through something horrible that you can't see. Hopefully she'll be able to learn that. Just because you can't see something doesn't mean it's not real for someone else. I don't know. I feel really weird now. That was a very odd tangent of things to talk about at once. Funny story, since I was raised by a clown. If you can imagine, waking up in the morning on a Saturday when your mom is getting ready for work and waking you up to clean your room. You're in a deep sleep, and all of a sudden you open your eyes, and right in front of your face is a full clown saying, "Wake up! Wake up!" And then just freaking out that there's a clown this close to your face. So, but that's my mom, right? So I feel like that's a very, very strange thing that not everybody gets to do. I have so many memories of everything. And the longer, I live, I guess. I mean, no one knows when they're going to die. Everybody can wake up the next morning and something can happen to them. So that's real. But for some strange reason, it feels different once you've been given a relatively terminal diagnosis, when they think like, oh, well, you can have 5 months or 5 years or 15 years, depending on how everything goes. And it sort of stops you from living, but it also pushes you into living also. And it does make a great platform for thinking about everything that happened and realizing that none of it really matters at all. In the grand scheme of everything, And I take care of people, and I take care of their health. I'm an acupuncturist by profession. And when I have people coming in to be treated, what they're going through is so important in that moment. And I want to meet them exactly where they are. And sometimes when the things that they're going through that they can't see are trivial, I think to myself, one day they will look back on this and say, that was so silly. And I hope that that's true for them. And no matter what I've gone through, because I've gone through so many stupid, horrible, crappy, bad things, traumas, lifelong PTSD, betrayals, everything. And it doesn't matter. As long as my child knows how much I love her, and as long as I can impart any kind of wisdom for her growth, then that's all I care about. She's literally what's keeping me alive. And I think that trying to pick stories eventually becomes so hard, even though it should be easy. Because I've got so many. I've got so many, you know. But I want to think about what we're going to do next. I want to think about what's going to happen over our next vacation. I don't want to plan too far ahead. I have to stop myself sometimes from trying to plan her wedding or thinking about her graduating from school. Because I might not be there. But I love thinking about it. And I love knowing that she gets to do all these awesome things that I might not ever do. And hopefully I'll be there with her when that happens. Because I do exist. And I don't have an expiration date stamped on my skin. And just because the Office of Vital Records claimed that I wasn't alive or in existence doesn't mean that I am not here. Because I am here, and my child is here. And we're going to make waves, I hope. And we're going to have stories that we can tell that might not matter because they've already happened. But the cool thing is that they're ours. And nobody gets to take them from us. It's our history and it's our truth. And I think that's really cool.